Hello and welcome to another live demonstration. As part of the Back to Basics series, I want to show you the new Daniel Smith colours because I think they're really wonderful. I just want to show you the process I go through when I am faced with new colours. So this looks a little bit complicated, but it's really not, and it's really useful. So I just do quick swatches of the colour and then you can see its properties. Daniel Smith are very good at telling you a lot of information about the colour. So let's just take one, for instance, Raw Sienna Light, one of the new colours. It tells you the pigment number. This is quite advanced for a lot of people, but people do sometimes like to know the pigment number because they're familiar with that pigment and how it works and its properties. But there's other things that, as a beginner or a intermediate, things you like to know. So Daniel Smith will also tell you that the colour is transparent or semi-transparent or opaque. So what's transparency mean? It means how much of the paper or the colour, the surface underneath, shines through the colour. Opaque means you can have a colour, I don't think I've got an opaque colour here to show you, but it will just cover, a bit like gouache, but you do get opaque watercolours that will just cover, and so they're nice for final finishes to be able to cover those areas underneath. Daniel Smith also tell you whether it's a granulating colour, which is useful information because sometimes you may want a really flat wash and you choose a colour that you like the colour of and then find out it has those grainy effects, which is a lovely effect on its own, but maybe not what you were looking for. And then another thing that Daniel Smith tell you is whether it's a staining colour. Now a staining colour is a colour that grips into the paper, and if you try and lift it off, it leaves some of the colour behind, which may not matter on many levels, but if you really want to go back and really want to freshen up or clean back an area and it's staining, it means the colour you put on top, if it's transparent, will still show some of that stain beneath it. But so lots of information available on the colour charts and on the tubes, and you will learn, more you practice, the more you'll learn about what actually is meant by it. But I think first things first, I like the colour. So I do a little colour chart, put the colours across the top, the same colours across the side, and then what I do is I mix as much as I can, a 50% mix, and see what other colours can be made from these colours. It gives me a starting point. It means when I'm doing a painting, I kind of know, actually, I quite like that blue and that pink, and they make a violet, not a purple. So it's really useful information. So it's worth, to be honest, it doesn't take a huge amount of time, but it's really worth it in the end because all of this is learning as you go along, and I think that's really important. So what I'm going to do with these new colours, I'm going to do swatches. I want to show you some of the lovely colours available in this new Daniel Smith range brought out this year. So I'm using a natural hairbrush for swatches because it holds plenty of water and it allows the paint to flow nicely on the paper. So the first one I'm looking at is called Lavender. So loaded my brush with water and then just using the tip to load up with paint. Now some colours you'll notice you have to put a lot more paint on. That's because they're transparent. So if you want a stronger wash, you need to just make sure you have plenty of paint. So I start holding the brush on the tip and I gradually begin to push it down onto the belly, which is here, which releases some more water, and it gives you a nice tonal range. Again, this is practice. You keep practicing and you get much better and quicker at it. So I'm just loading up my brush again with water for the next colour, which is Quinacridone Lilac. I can see that's a lovely strong colour. I don't need to load my brush as much as I did with the lavender. So again, just using the tip and bringing the brush down, and it's releasing more water, and you can see the tonal values there. Some colours are easier to do than others, but this is how you learn this. This is how you understand how this works. So next one is the Wisteria. So this looks like a creamy kind of pink colour. So there we go. Again, just tip of the brush. It's quite creamy. You can feel the difference, and just allowing some of the water from the brush to create a new tone. So you can see here that moved slightly differently to this, and it created a tone a lot more easily. But that's how the different pigments work. That's how different paints work. So, you know, you practice, you have one colour and you find all its possibilities. So the next one is Rose Madder Permanent. And again, I can see this is quite a strong colour, but not as strong as the quinacridone as I'm loading my brush. So even from the palette, I'm learning the strength of the colour. So loading the tip of the brush, and again, pushing the belly through to see if I can get some tonal values. Right, Payne's Blue Grey next. Just making sure I've got plenty of water on this natural hair brush. Natural hair brushes are like your own hair. If you just dip them in water, all it does is coat the outside surface of the hairs, and it means the belly and the middle isn't wet. So you just got to make sure with these natural hair brushes that they are really dipped well into the water. So just taking some of this colour, again, tip of the brush, tip, taking it through to the belly. So again, that's a colour that made really easy tonal values. So the next one is Aussie Red Gold. So quite a nice, strong yellow, orange yellow actually. There we go with that. So again, nice tonal values with that. I'm just making sure I'm loading my brush with water. So the next one is Burnt Sienna Light. So let's see what colour this creates. I haven't mixed fully, so obviously it feels a little bit stickier, which is obviously a characteristic of that pigment. So I need to mix a little bit more on the palette. And again, bringing the belly down to give me some tonal values. If I have a little bit, I could do a little bit longer, you will see better tonal values, but I've only got a small area to be able to put all 8 colours on. And I had to fight for this size of area in the first place.
What palette are you using there?
This one is a China palette. I like a China palette. It's great for studio work. There are lots of different palettes, plastic, aluminium. A good palette for watercolour should always be white, because the surface you're working on is white. I would talk about something different later, but predominantly a white palette, because you're working on white paper. You can see the colours much better. But I like a China palette. But I've known people use paper plates, use China plates. I like the flat. Some people like Wells. I like the flat because I'm quite messy and I'm not actually really organised. So I tend to just make a big mess in the middle. But that's what works for me. So it's, again, what works for you. But I like the China palette. It's nice for working next to you, and it feels nice when I'm mixing the colours. So the last colour is Raw Sienna Light. So another yellow. A little bit duller this time than the other yellow. It's a red yellow, I think, the Aussie Red Gold. But this is a nice, yeah, and you can see again the turnaround. Let's keep going because I've got space now. And you can see here how you can get more tonal values the longer you can hold your brush out. So I'm quite familiar with paints and I have an instinct. I know what will happen pretty much, but I still do this because these will sometimes surprise me, and I'll look at and go, oh, that's actually quite interesting. And it makes my next stage of creating a picture much easier by just doing some little plays. I'm using practice paper, so it's not expensive, but it gives me that possibilities of being able to practice and work on my techniques and my colours on a good quality artist paper, but not be afraid to try things. And what I can do is mix these, lift out, see how they work with other mediums, and all of this before I've done a painting. So enough of swatches on the paints. So Daniel Smith, range of 8, lovely new colours. Daniel Smith have also brought out Watercolour Ground, some new colours. Now Daniel Smith make Watercolour Ground, they make a white, a black, a buff and a transparent. And these are preparation surfaces so you can paint on with watercolour. So why would I need to do that? You've got watercolour paper. Most watercolour paintings are done on watercolour paper or canvases that have been made specifically to take watercolour. But this is what this ground is for. It's specifically made to have the absorbency and the grip to allow you to paint with watercolour. You can paint it on almost any surface. So this is a little plastic board. You can paint it on glass, wood, metal, and then you can paint on with watercolour, which is really opening up the medium of watercolour, and it's a lot of fun. So the white gives you a dull, a matte finish, very much like a knot paper. The black will give you a black finish, which great for opaque colours. The buff is kind of a creamy brown colour. Again, great fun for experimenting with your watercolours. And then the clear, why would I need clear? Because nice piece of wood, paint on it, and you can see the wood beneath it, but you can paint on with watercolour. So the new colours. The first one is called Pearlescent White. So I've done swatches on here, and you can see it's got a nice shimmer. Wow, it's white, so you shouldn't have problems with colours, like transparent colours should be fine because it's a white surface, but what it's got is that bit of shimmer. So you could paint it over your watercolour paper and give yourself a white shimmery surface, which you now know you can paint on with watercolour. But what you can do is you can paint on pots, glass. So I've been having little plays. These are just leftover food pots. I'm always reluctant to throw them away because you can use them for water pots. And you can see here, I've put a layer around the pot, and it's quite tough because I'm not being very careful and I can't scrape off the areas where I've not been that careful with. So first things first, I clean the pot. The label's not come off fully, but I'm not worried about that because I know it will paint over. And I used a nice flat brush to give me a good covering. When you're painting with these grounds, lots of layers, as thin as possible, you start to build up your surface that way. So I started painting with it. It didn't seem to stick, and I thought, that's strange. I must be doing something wrong because I know Daniel Smith have, developed these and know what they're doing. It must be something I'm doing. So I reread the instructions, and actually it does say on a smooth, shiny surface, I need to create an abrasive surface. So I just sandpapered it down, problem solved. So it does really warrant reading the instructions and not skipping bits because I got a bit excited and I wanted to have a go. So this one's had, I would say, about 3 or 4 layers because it's quite a transparent surface. This one I think has only had 2 layers. The other colour, let's put that in there. The other colour is the gold. It's called iridescent gold, and you can see there how that's created a gold surface. So again, you can put that all over your watercolour paper, and you can now apply watercolour to it. Stir, mix, and like I say, lots of thin layers. What you do need to do is let them dry between layers. So it's about 24 hours to 72 hours between your layers to dry. So it's not a quick process to get your surface prepared, but once you have, it's so much fun. So gold, I must be looking forward to spring because I'm doing lots of bees and it's really inspiring me. So you can see on this, I was worried about which colours would work well on it, but the colours I've worked are all transparent colours and they've stayed on, they've not disappeared into the colour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replicate these images for you onto pre-prepared surface, But I think I'll do that after the break. So join me in a few minutes and I will do little demos of painting onto the watercolour ground.
Let us bring out the artist in you. If you'd like to learn how to paint or improve your painting, the SAA, Society for All Artists, is here to inform, encourage and inspire you every step of the way. When you become an SAA member, you get so many benefits, including the free bi-monthly newsletter Paint, packed with inspiring step-by-step projects, fascinating articles, and detailed information to get your creative juices flowing. Discounts on over 13,000 art products featured on the SAA website and in the Home Shop catalogue, with free order line and free delivery in the UK mainland. A devoted SAA team on hand to answer your questions and give you the confidence and motivation you need to start painting and develop at a pace that suits you. Plus, a free welcome pack filled with gifts and practical help to get you started, as well as the opportunity to make friends with like-minded people.
First thing to be a member is the inspiration from the magazines, to be able to purchase things at a very reasonable price.
Yeah, you get the reduction on all the materials, the advice you get.
I can shop from home.
It's a community.
It seemed like a very friendly sort of organisation.
If somebody's thinking of joining, don't spend too long thinking. Just join. They'll love it.
And we're back.
Hello and welcome back. So I'm going to show you the Daniel Smith new watercolour grounds, which we have iridescent gold and pearlescent white, which can be painted on almost any surface and give you a new exciting dimension and surface for watercolour painting. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you some of the same images I've put on the pots and just do you a quick demonstration of bees. Like I say, I must be looking forward to summer and I love the bees in the garden. Okay, so I'm going to use the colours I have. I'm not worried about, I know these work, I know the colours will work for bees. What I did notice when I was painting, and you'll probably see it, is when I put the colour on, it just seemed to absorb very quickly. And these watercolours do dry very quickly. So you're getting nice sharp edges, but the colour is a lot weaker than you possibly anticipated. I mean, it's not a problem. It takes layers really well. So what you can do is you can build up. I always usually like strong colours. So for me, this is making me work a lot softer and a lot more considerately than I normally do. I have, as I always do when I'm doing a new subject, I've actually looked at the anatomy of a bee. Not because I want to do a completely detailed bee, but what I want to be able to do is give a good representation. And I don't feel I can do that without knowing actually where do the legs attach? Are they halfway down at the back of the body? So I just learned that kind of thing, you know, the shape of the head and where parts of the body attach to each other. Okay, so this is, I'm not sure which bee it is, but it's quite a black body and only a couple of colours. So not many stripes on this one. So, but I do know the Australian red gold is a lovely colour to add some. Oops, I think that's got a bit too big. But what I have discovered with this ground is that it's really easy to lift off colours and to take it back and to rework, which I've found to be really useful. You can see there taking the colours back and how easy it is to lift off and clean back when I feel it's not quite the right shape. But I'll show you when I do the wings that I'm actually using the characteristics of this ground for the actual purpose of lifting out. Again, I know they have a yellow. I like to make sure that there's a good representation, but I'm not overly worrying about. So just putting out some more. Now I'm going to put some pink in it. I'm going to be a little stronger. Just see how the pink works. I love that. Okay, so the legs, I know they have a set that come out here and they have little feet. And the two come out from the back. Like I say, you can see I'm not really worrying about it, but it's just for me, I do know then that it's going to look at least a bit like a bee. So you can see here it's faded quite soft. Now for me, I actually quite like that this time. I'm just going to add a little bit more tone and a bit more detail on the body, just to strengthen it a little bit, and on the head. But I'm being really careful not to overwork, and this bit here I can fix if I clean my brush and lift off, because it's not what I needed, all fixed. So the last feature, because I think that's quite nice as it is, it's quite loose, are the wings. Now this, I've drawn a flying bee. So I've looked at where the wings come from the body. They come here. Okay, that looks quite harsh. And if you had taken a photograph of a flying bee, you wouldn't get that really harsh wing. But I do know it's really easy to soften and take off some of that colour. And at the moment they're a bit sharp because I'm just working on the shape. I know they come from out of the back here. So you can see how just thinking about and learning a little bit about what I'm painting, I can just, you learn each time you do it, you just know that you're going to be able to do it each time, because you just know the legs are going to come out the right place and pretty much the size of the body. So I'm just going to even soften these even more and maybe blur them, because I want to suggest some movement, which is quite difficult. The body held there and it's the wings that are moving. Now, if I keep working, I might just do the head, because I know they've got really bright eyes. And I think I've lost that a little bit. But what I would do is keep working, but I actually quite like that nice softness of the bee. And you can see how well the colour, the Payne's Grey, which, let me check, which is why I've done this, is semi-transparent, but it's taken to the gold really well. And the Australian gold, red gold, is transparent. But you can see how the colours work. So what I would do is check before you apply it, but don't be afraid to try. So I think I'll do another one, but I'll be really quick this time and just show you how you can really work the surface. So I'm going to create a bee on some buddleia, which I've just cut back, so I've been gardening, because they are super growers. So I know the shape. I'm just using my brush shape to create an impression. And you can see how just using the tip of the brush is actually creating the shape of the buddleia flower. quite simply. Yeah, I'm not having to worry about detail, and I want it to be quite soft. So I'm just using a wet brush. I'm just going to soften some areas.
I've got another question for you.
Yes.
Ian, who's watching, wants to know if the texture changes the feel of your artwork as you're painting, whether it feels different under your brush, I guess.
Well, yes. All different surfaces will change how you paint, but that's why you practice. This is why I've done testers, and I find that for me, I like really strong work, but it doesn't always allow me to do that. So I've just got to adapt. I have to soften a little bit. But I've found that you can work it's changed the way I'm looking at working, because normally I would do quite a strong bee, a bit more detail, but the surface of the ground takes the colour down to a lower limit than I'm used to. So therefore I'm having to adapt, and actually I'm going with it. I'm just allowing myself to step back and not worry about it when I would normally go, oh, a little bit more, a little bit more. I'm just going, well, no, actually, this is what this material's doing. I'm going to go with it. So I hope that's answered your question. If not, just, continue to ask questions, and I hopefully will get to the answer you're looking for. So I'm just going to put a little bit of darkness into this flower. Again, I don't want to overwork, but I do know by just putting some water. You can see I'm using quite a big brush because I did start off with a smaller brush, but I found I was fluffing too much. I was working and getting overwhelmed with the amount of detail I was trying to do, and I found I'd overworked. Like I say, you can easily bring this back. You just wipe it back and you can work on it again. But so by having a bigger brush, what that's done is stop me fussing, because it's put the paint down really quickly. Okay, let's see, I'm just softening that. You can see here how very much easier it is to soften than on the paper, because though it's dried quite quickly, the surface allows you to just manipulate and lift. I'll tell you what's bothering me, I've got no green. So all the time I'm just thinking and adapting. Okay, just let that happen. Right, so last thing is a quick bee, and I want to show you how I can lift back. So I'm just going to do, again, I've checked and I've looked at the shape a bee would make if it was sitting on a flower. So the back goes up like that, and then it's got a body. So I've done that all in black. That isn't the colour of a bee. Looks like an ant now. But I'm confident that the wings come across the back here, and you can see them more because they're at rest. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just go down to a smaller brush, because this is when I want to work on detail. I'm just going to bring out the bee I was looking at. Has a yellow back, well, it's a brown back really. So I'm going to use some of that Australian gold and drop it in, and just see how it blends in. Like I say, it dries quite quickly, but it's not quite dry, that it still feathers a little bit, which I think's something you either are surprised with or you work with. And I know that I need to indicate it's a bee, and all bees will have stripes. They have different number of stripes depending on the variety of bee. So you can see how I'm lifting back. Going to do 2 and keep the end of the abdomen black. Okay, so I'm lifting it back, and now I'm going to just drop in some colour. Right, last thing I'm going to do, apart from fix that because that is bugging me. Shape's wrong, but you can see how easy it is actually to fix. I'm just going to put some legs on, and I'm just going to darken up the body. So the legs, I know there's legs that come out from the top, and then 2 sets of legs from the back of the front part of the abdomen. Now, normally I would block that off, but I think I'm going to leave it and see what happened, because I wanted to darken off. See how that's run into? Here, I'm getting my finger on the wet paint, so that's starting to blob a little bit. But, okay. So that small error has actually worked for me, because it's darkened under the body, which I was going to do anyway. Very fine. Then I know. I don't think I need to fuss anymore. But you can see how painting with watercolour works on this ground, but you need to find out for yourself. So, as with everything, try and test beforehand, but I hope you have fun. The main thing is to have fun in these really exciting new surfaces for watercolour. So I hope you enjoyed that, and join me soon for another live demonstration.